Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019. Trying to be careful about that. I'm reading it off the check I just successfully wrote. Please retire that joke. Okay, it's our first live show of the brand new year. If you tuned in yesterday, lucky you. You got a brand new show. But though we were alive at the time that the show was airing, we were not actually speaking into the microphone at that time. We pre-recorded it. Hope you enjoyed it. Perhaps it, I don't know. Perhaps it moved you to donate a giant sum of money. Perhaps. Who knows? Perhaps not. But perhaps it got you through the day. Perhaps it helped cure your hangover. Perhaps you don't drink at all and you laugh at the rest of us who do. Managed to make it without a hangover yesterday. I don't really do the hangover thing all that often. I mean, well, first of all, you know, who drinks like they used to when they were a kid or whatever. Well, okay, I do that sometimes, but the point is, I didn't this time, and so it was good, and I had lots of water, and I hydrated, and I did it very scientifically, and so I had an enjoyable New Year's Eve and an okay New Year's Day. I mean, I never feel 100% on New Year's Day, but you get all day off to relax and do that. I got up yesterday to press the play button, so that was tough work. But back in place, I believe, today, joining us on Netroots Radio and back to work, Justice Putnam. And I'm sure Justice will tell you all about what's going on if he's doing a live show today, but a bit of a disruption, you might say, in his life. I'll leave it to him to tell you about it, unless he gives me the words to do it for him, although last time out he did make some mention. So we'll catch you up to speed on it, but condolences in order for Justice. He's told lots of his friends online and elsewhere. He, I guess rather unexpectedly, and I guess it's always unexpected, he lost his son at 41 years of age just the other day, and so dealing with a difficult situation. I am sure we're pleased to have you with us before, during, and after. And you take your time, Justice, in getting back to work, and we'll take care of our end of the bargain and provide the show. And if at some point it gets in the way of the arrangements he's got to make, we'll be recording podcasts and putting them out on that format if we can't stream live. So anyway, like a trooper, working through it, not because we require it, but because it's therapeutic sometimes to continue with work. But if at any point that should change, please just drop us a line and go do what you need to do. So our condolences to Justice. And, it's generally a somber mood starting out in 2019 anyway, because Donald Trump is president. He's still president, and as it turns out, it's going to have some influence on the country. Tomorrow, January 3rd, Thursday, is the first day of the new incoming 116th Congress, complete with a Democratic majority in the House, if they're still going to go ahead and swear people in. No panicking or anything. I don't see any indication that, I see no indication that Donald Trump understands the levers of power at his control allegedly as president of the United States than he did before. But not much can stand in the way, legally speaking, of getting this thing underway. In fact, really nothing. And January 3rd is the day appointed constitutionally for their reconstitution of the House. So tomorrow they'll be adopting rules. They'll be electing a speaker. I think the speaker question has been over for some time. Everybody expects it will go smoothly now. And Nancy Pelosi will return to the rostrum and stand atop the dais, I guess, with the gavel in hand. And she'll get a big ceremonial gavel. It won't be the gavel she actually uses in the House. So if you take a close look at what goes on tomorrow, they may hand her a giant oversized gavel. And they use a very regularly sized gavel day to day in the House. But it's a good day to observe procedure. I recommend that everybody, if you've got the flexibility, glue yourself to C-SPAN, not the actual, physical offices, but watch C-SPAN on television tomorrow, and get familiar with it. And you might want to read to familiarize yourself ahead of time. CRS, the Congressional Research Service, has a fantastic document updated from time to time. The First Day of a New Congress, a guide to proceedings on the House floor, last updated in July. Well, the version I have here is July of 2017. There may be a new one, but CRS, one of those odd organizations that doesn't directly publish these things for the general public, despite the fact that they are publicly financed and publicly funded at 100%. And it's an arm of Congress, but I don't know how they actually work that out. But they do a lot of confidential work for members of Congress that they don't want published, and so they had to work out some sort of weird exception. The is it the FAS? Is that the Federation of American Scientists? Is that what it is? They have actually stepped into the void there, and for many years they've done a great service to the American public by collecting as many of the Congressional Research Service's reports as they can legally get their hands on and publishing them regardless of content, just because, just on principle, they think, and they're correct, that the American public has a right to see at least the vast majority of their reports that don't contain any confidential information. But as you can imagine, every once in a while, a member of Congress needs to be able to call on Congressional Research Service in confidence, at least for some time and some period of the work that they're doing on their project. And I suppose those I don't know how many of them there are, but they may never see the light of the day. But the First Day of a New Congress, a guide to proceedings on the House floor, Googleable, and of course any part of that sentence will likely get you the right report, and you can read it, see exactly what they're doing and how they do it, the mechanics of how they do things. Very few times during the year when the mechanics are as important as the first day and explain as much about why we do the things we do and how we do them as the first day does. So here's Greg for his first day of the new year. We have to ask for your certificate of election, and then you come into the well of the radio here, and we swear you in. Are you ready, Greg?
Yeah, so that means I'm not official until that happens, correct?
Right. I didn't, and none of that is on the record. It will
okay.
Be actually,
well, none of it matters. So,
okay.
But I do want to start with condolences to Justice and everybody, him and everybody associated with him, a dear part of our family. So, just so he knows.
Yes.
Nice I have some ideas about Nancy Pelosi.
Okay.
And the gavel, because I think the gavel is really important.
Okay.
First of all, what if she used the giant gavel the entire year?
That would be okay. It might break.
What if, there's no rules, right?
Not about the gavel.
It's still official. So if there's no rules about the gavel, what if she doesn't use a gavel at all? What if she uses Thor's hammer?
If she can lift she's Thor.
I don't mean a replica. I mean the actual hammer.
Well.
And yeah, lifting it makes a point, doesn't it?
It does.
You lift it, Donald.
Right. Well, he can flex. I know I've seen him do that. And
right. And if that doesn't work, then maybe she could just use the sword and the stone, or maybe the one from the Lady of the Lake. The point is to get the point across here that we're talking about something that is going to matter now.
Yes. The other thing, by the way, just as we're getting into the symbolism and pomp and circumstance of the House, there's another symbol of the House's authority, which you'll see.
It's the giant mace that somebody's...
Yeah.
No. That's the House of Commons story.
Well, they do have a giant mace. It's not as giant. It doesn't have a big crown on the top. It has like an eagle on the top, because we're into eagles instead of kings and queens, apparently. But there is a mace of the House.
What happens if somebody runs up and takes it like they did in the House of Commons a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they chase you. I imagine that happens.
But if it disappears, does that mean you can't meet? You're not legitimate? That's what happens over in England.
Maybe. I think we would probably come up with a different... I think a trap door opens up. You fall into a pit of sharks when you pull it. Or a giant stone comes out from behind the flag and rolls, and you have to... Yeah,
like in Monty Python, it just crushes you into
I was thinking Raiders of the Lost Ark. You have to race it to the exit and see if you can slide into the door.
The point is, if you succeed and it disappears, what happens? It's a symbol of what? What is it a symbol of?
It is a symbol of
the mace over in the House of Commons is a symbol of the Queen being present and agreeing that you guys are allowed to do this?
True.
What does it mean in the United States?
It is the symbol of the House's sovereign authority. So maybe Donald Trump should steal that, and then he can dissolve Congress.
Then he can sell it to Russia, and it's a
on
twofer
eBay.
for him.
Yes. We'll look that up.
No,
I'm sure
surprised
there's a
Dana
real good
Rohrabacher
answer
didn't already do that.
I had this
You know
vision.
what? Maybe you should go check and see if it's the real one and not a replica. Maybe Dana Rohrabacher already did that.
Hey, he could have done that, and you'd never find it in his house, from what I understand.
Right, and you never know it because, who goes and looks at the mace?
You can spot the mace, and one of the funky things that they do with the mace during the year is, perhaps you've heard me talk about how the House sometimes will, as they say, resolve itself into the committee of the whole, and then resolve itself back into the House. They switch back and forth, and you can tell which one they're in by the position of the mace. The mace comes down from its holder when they're in the committee of the whole House, because committees don't have maces. But when you're meeting as the House, the mace goes up in this little marble holder, and it's up a little higher. And
wow!
Can you believe somebody's job is, they get paid to move it up, down. They do other things, but if you want to save money in the budget.
That's interesting. So on C-SPAN,
put it in a little
this
elevator.
is C-SPAN 2, or which one covers the House?
C-SPAN 1 covers the House.
C-SPAN 1 covers the House. C-SPAN 2 covers the Senate.
Right.
So if you watch C-SPAN 1, you'll be able to see the mace at some point during the proceedings?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's visible right behind there. It's a big, tall, like a scepter with a silver eagle on it, and one of those reminders that for some reason at early points in our history, we thought it was really cool to have fascist symbols on these things. So they have that fasces. It's right up there. So
Nancy could gavel things in using that mace.
She could.
No, she can't, because then that would come off the wall, and so that wouldn't matter.
When you get unruly, and everyone remembers from time to time, we're reminded that there's a sergeant at arms in the House, and an unruly member. If anybody ever asks what happens if you run out of time and they gavel you and you keep blabbing over it and you get louder and they gavel and everybody say regular order and they can't make you shut up, they can order the sergeant at arms to present the mace. They'll pick up the mace and they'll go stick it in your face, and I guess you're supposed to shut up because it's so awesome. I don't know why anybody would at that point say, yeah. Now
because
I
they'll clobber you on the head with it. I mean,
Now that would be serious.
That's the point of a mace.
It is, and I've never heard of anyone getting hit with it. Even the guy who caned Sumner, but he did that over in the Senate side.
He did over in the Senate.
They have a mace too.
It didn't matter. Does the Senate have their own mace?
I think so.
Can you have a war between the two maces? I mean,
should.
if you don't agree, if you can't, if you're in committee and you can't decide which one you're going to vote for, can you have okay, we elect a second. This is our guy with the mace. You come with whoever wins, whoever survives. This fight to the death. Whoever survives, that's the version we'll pass.
That would be an idea as a gladiatorial thing, but it would have to be somewhere else, and it can't be in committee. Committees don't have maces. It has to be
right.
It stays in the House and the Senate. They could fight in the rotunda.
That would be even better. Each one has to stay in your respective area and then swing maces, and we'll see who wins. Of course, you can't reach them because they're over on the other side.
Right. And if you throw your mace at the other one, they say, "We have your authority now.
We have your weapon now. You have to surrender."
This has happened in 1911.
Thank goodness there's no ceremonial machine guns.
That's a symbol of authority.
That would be.
Yeah, and the NRA would proudly provide it, but I think they'd clean it every once in a while. That's very dangerous.
But honestly, the whole idea that there are symbols of authority that turn out to be weapons of war that are positioned in a particular point on the wall of the respective chambers, it's kind of interesting in terms of origins.
A reminder that it is ultimately brute force at the bottom of all this. And
really.
Voting is a nicety that we substituted for assembling on a field of battle and either counting one another's forces and making a guess as to what to do, or just out and out having the war.
So when Donald Trump dissolves Congress, I just have a feeling, when he reconstitutes it, what he'll do is he'll substitute, instead of having the ceremonial mace, we'll have the ceremonial TV ratings. We'll just put them right up there. And that is the symbol of my authority. And, over on the Senate side, it'll be the symbolic pole of the base, because that's their constitutional authority, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
And you don't need these weapons of war. You have to go modern here. You have to go 21st century.
Yep. Well, maybe we can update the mace. I don't see a Senate mace, actually. Maybe they don't because they were originally
maybe they don't have one.
chosen
Maybe they have a
by
sword.
the states, etc. Right.
Yeah. Because you always want to see a gladiatorial battle between a mace and a sword.
Yeah. If you ever wondered who would win.
The stronger person, whichever one is wielding it, really. But it's fascinating. So she could use the ceremonial Gavel. I really think Thor's hammers is a much better symbol, though, for her, because a lot's going to happen. As far as the shutdown goes, we don't know what's going on. We know a couple of things.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, the strategy for how this ends may be starting to unfold before us. Donald Trump tweets this morning, Mexico is paying for the wall through the new USMCA trade deal.
Oh.
And I never get this USMCA. It's like an amalgamation of the Marines and copyright on music.
Yeah.
And he threw it all together and called it a trade deal. Much of the wall has already been fully renovated or built. We've done a lot of work, $5.6 billion, that the House has approved is very little in comparison to the benefits of national security, quick payback. A couple of points about this. As Jake Sherman points out on Twitter this morning, the trade deal has not passed.
Well,
right?
then,
it hasn't passed yet. So if it hasn't passed yet, how is Mexico paying for the wall?
It's, well, who cares? They're not. But, okay, right? That's actually a good point. I mean, it won't, help any with Donald Trump.
But my point is, the point of this tweet is that no matter what happens, and Nancy Pelosi's making no deals, but the point is that Donald Trump can declare victory and walk away, whatever it is that they do.
I guess.
He can say, see, I already got what I wanted. You tried to thwart me by not giving me anything but a clean CR. But I already got what I wanted, so I win. Of course I'll sign it.
All right. That might be one we have to let him.
You have to, because a narcissist cannot lose. It's like conservatism.
I mean, I guess we don't have to do it.
Conservatism never loses.
Do it,
you can only fail.
Say no.
You can only fail conservatism. Conservatism never fails. And Donald Trump never loses. So even when he loses, he wins. How does he do that? He declares he won.
I lost on purpose because it was victorious.
Yeah, right. It's not exactly that he's thinking about it. But that's one way out of this, is for him to simply declare that he won. Now, another thing, according to Sarah Sanders, is that breaking up the payment for the government into different areas and funding all of them except Homeland Security, which they then have a month to argue about, which is, I guess, the Democratic plan. Sarah Sanders says, well, we're not going to do that. What we will do, however, is we'll have Nancy and Chuck over for dinner or lunch, and we'll talk about that. But we're going to do it not in front of the cameras, not that because I'm afraid of the cameras,
right?
But we'll do it. We'll do it in the X-Men's danger room, so that the cameras aren't allowed.
Okay.
Wait! I meant the Situation Room.
Right. And that's
I'm afraid of the danger room. Too much danger.
So no TVs, no phones.
We'll have it fumigated
no lights,
first,
no
and everything
cars.
will be wiped down because I'm germophobic. But we'll do it in the Situation Room where even germs aren't allowed, and we'll have a negotiation.
Right. No wonder he hates Germany so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Armando's tweeting in that the plan is just to approve whatever the Senate approved. Maybe.
I thought
but
that was
the Democrats
the
have been
plan.
talking about actually breaking the bills apart.
Yeah.
And then daring the Senate and Trump to pass the parts.
Yes.
And then what? So I'm not totally sure, because the Democrats actually have 2 or 3 different strategies. I don't know which one they're going to do. The newspapers have been reporting they're going to do the break it up into pieces strategy.
Right. I heard that last night as well. My assumption was that they were simply going to do, this is the same bill we passed the other day, and see how that goes.
That's the other way.
Yeah. I think that one is, I have a feeling that the White House may have signaled, not Trump himself, but someone else, that that one is too embarrassing for Trump. That's just a straight up cave if he takes that. Otherwise, it demands a veto. And I think maybe the splitting it up thing was supposed to be, well, this is a new approach. And if he would agree to a new approach, that wouldn't be quite so embarrassing. But now,
right. Either way, you
says
fund Homeland Security for a month, and then you get to argue about it, whether you do it as the big bill or the little parts of the bill.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, Pelosi is fairly adept at trying not to insult Donald Trump to his face. She's perfectly capable of insulting him when he's not there.
She asked to do it in
Oh,
private.
we saw that on television. She was very polite. She, Mr. President did him to death. And then they left, and she said, well, it was just him trying to prove his manhood. She's perfectly capable of insulting him. She's not going to say that to his face. So you have to have some face saving as part of the norms that Democrats want to preserve because they're worthwhile, better than just wanging on everybody with maces. And therefore, you want some sort of face-saving maneuver. So what you do is you break it up into pieces, let Trump claim that he won, and then you move on.
Well, if you can get him to do it. Now, I don't know what the point of having Sarah Sanders say no was, and it might not be
Well,
effective.
it might not matter. What's the point of Lindsey Graham floating different schemes?
Oh, I don't know. What's the point of Lindsey Graham doing anything? He's
right.
nonstop.
I mean, he doesn't speak for the White House, and Sarah Sanders doesn't speak for the White House. And the whole point is she can't negotiate with Trump until Trump finishes negotiating with himself. So, whether there's any back and forth about what would be or would not be acceptable is unclear. In past situations, Mitch McConnell would be the interperson,
middleman,
sectional person here who would settle everything. But I think he's shrugged his shoulders and given up. So I don't know what role the Senate's going to play in this.
That's an open question too, and there's always the possibility that you eventually anger the Senate enough that they say, we'll just, if you veto it, we'll override.
Right. Armando thinks it's all PR, and of course it is.
Yeah,
the question is, what's an acceptable win? Okay, if you're really holding out to just beat Donald Trump metaphorically to death and have him just admit that he was completely wrong and I folded, that's not going to happen. That would be the most satisfying, of course.
Yes.
But that's not going to happen.
Sure.
So you got to give him some sort of out so you get what you want, and he claims victory. Then that has to be the way this works out.
So metaphors are big these days.
Yeah. Well, we had a whole discussion. As a matter of fact, I put that in the pundit report today. Mm-hmm. So we were explaining the synecdoche and the metonymy of all of this. And, you could see it with actually Jim Kelly.
John.
Or whatever his name is, John Kelly.
Yeah,
and
Jim Kelly's
Trump,
retired.
When they're negotiating over the wall.
So is John Kelly.
Kelly says the wall doesn't really exist.
Yeah, that's right.
And Trump says, no, it's everything.
Yeah, variously. It's
right?
either
so
everything or nothing.
Kelly comes across as this is part of the symbolism. Doesn't really mean what it means when you say wall. And Trump says, no, wall is wall. Wall is everything.
And they've
wall is
removed
Fortress America, and it's part of actual fortress that we're building with gates and moats and alligators and all that sort of stuff. We'll start with Florida. And so the whole idea here is that it's a physical something, and if you don't build me my monument, then I haven't won. And Pelosi and Schumer are saying, it's not going to happen. So how do we, maybe we can give them like a little wall. It's like, the small plot of land joke. We hold up a little piece of turf.
Yeah. And there's no telling what he'll
small
accept.
plot of land. You got what you wanted. Let's just go ahead and finish the government stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. But it is true that no one, Mitch McConnell in particular, has no idea what to do because the president is such a loon. He could tell you exactly what he wants. And if you do that thing, if he hears on the radio that wasn't what he wanted, then that's all over. If the television says you wanted more or you shouldn't have done that, he'll just
All right, so on Fox and Friends
quit.
or Rush Limbaugh said this or that, they should be in the room negotiating because obviously, you got to have them as part of the deal.
I mean, I guess you do. So, I don't know exactly what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. And the approach that they take, one bill or several, will have a lot to do with secret signals that they're getting from White House personnel and
which Trump
new
will
members.
Then completely undercut as soon as they do it. That's the problem.
Yeah,
so they need him to go public and do it first.
And the other factor is brand new members of the House, some of whom have really got no government experience, trying to guess what's the best thing to do. Is it stand pat? Is it look reasonable? Is it make an offer? Is it so? It's Armando objects. It can't be secret signals. Well,
No.
it is.
First it's secret signals, and then you agree to the secret signals, and then you say as part of the deal, you have to make it public first.
Right. Well, I mean, you don't want to leave it that way. But the fact is the White House has already communicated to the House and Senate something, and I don't know what it is, and you don't know what it is. That makes it a secret signal. And you can object to keeping it secret, but it started that way, and it still is now. The end.
So does that mean that the Secret Service is negotiating? Because, they're really good with secrets?
No one knows.
So is the CIA. No. Trump doesn't like those people.
No.
So we don't know. I mean, there is literally nothing you could do until Trump decides what it is that he's doing. Because no matter what it is, whether it's public or private, he will undermine you unless you have some ironclad way of making him stick to what he does. Of course, the alternative is my alternative. Do what you want and just override him.
There's always that. And
because if he keeps acting irrationally and crazy, that's the only thing you're going to be able to do.
Look, make it public, right? It still doesn't matter. The meeting the first time was public, and he said on television and on tape ad nauseum, everybody's playing it as a GIF over and over again on Twitter. I will take responsibility. I'm not going to blame you. I'll be proud to. And immediately, nope. That's how you read a Trump comment. We've taught that lesson a number of times. Said he wasn't going to blame Democrats, so that he went and blamed Democrats. Have a public announcement. It won't matter for him, but for the rest of us,
so my point has always been, since he's completely, totally untrustworthy.
Yes.
Completely. He's a proven grifter and con man.
Yes.
Do what you want and override him.
Yeah.
You have the authority to do that, at least as long as the mace is on the wall.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know what they're going to do in the Senate because they don't have a mace. I looked it up, but that's all you can do. And they should have a public meeting. Should absolutely announce the deal publicly. Trump should be forced to take the lead in doing that. That doesn't mean he'll stick to it. It doesn't mean that we win, definitely, even if he breaks it. It's going to have to be a part of the process. It, too, is part of a PR game, and that part we definitely want to play. So, all right, we'll be back in 2 minutes to discuss the entirety of the rest of the year. I hope you have that ready for us, and we'll see you in just a bit.
Well, the rest of the year is a lot.
True. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air. And now, that's down to about 1 in 15. But we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you. But remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box. And you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. During the break, Greg has just informed me we're going to spend the rest of the show. Is that what you said? The rest of the show on. No, but reminding everybody that if you wanted to read about what they do on the first day of a new Congress on the Senate floor, there is a corresponding CRS report. I'll include links to those. Everybody can read those on their own. That one written a little more recently, updated on December 19th, 2018. They're anticipating something. Okay. Not necessarily. Okay.
Well, the other thing I think is of interest here, I'm showing you the ceremonial Senate gavel.
Yeah. Yes, the gavel.
This is an hourglass-shaped ivory gavel, and it's a replacement for the original, which shattered during a late-night debate in 1954, the year I was born.
Ooh, man. That was some rough gaveling back in 50, what?
The most revered historic artifact in the Senate is the gavel, says the United States Senate official website. This small,
used to be
handleless piece of solid ivory was used by the Senate's presiding officers from around the late 18th, early 19th century until a late-night debate in 54, when the gavel fell apart as Vice President Richard Nixon, as in foreshadowing, called the Senate to order. Having already been reinforced once with silver pieces attached to both ends, the gavel was immediately replaced with a near replica provided by the government of India. When the Senate
thank
is
you,
in
India.
session, the replacement gavel is used to call the chamber to order.
Yes. There, you see that gavel every once in a while, and yeah, it is. It's a handheld, no handle. You just grab the top of it and like wrap it with wrist action on the.
Right.
That's a cool thing. All right, so thanks India for the replacement. I guess because it was ivory and maybe they had some sitting around.
Right.
Who knows?
I'm surprised Trump didn't, decide to offer to replace it with a gilt gold one,
Right. It's
right, with his
huge,
name on it.
spray
and
painted
diamonds.
plywood.
Fake diamonds. Industrial diamonds.
Yeah, it could be cubic zirconia. Well, all right. So that no mace, but a gavel, and the house gavel does have the handle, and you'll see it. You'll see a different one on Friday, but tune in on Thursday to see the big dark wood ceremonial one handed over, and then the light wood one for daily use comes back on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That is fascinating for all of you, I'm sure. I like the Senate gavel, though. That's a neat one.
What about the candy desk?
Yeah.
The other thing
Right,
that the
that's
Senate
out
does
there, too.
is they use desks as their symbols of things. So they have gavels and desks, and that's it.
Yes. It's the symbol of they are sitting down. I don't know. But they decided to have desks, yes.
So I have this, again, this is all from the official Senate site. The Senate candy desks. Traditions associated with the Senate desk continue to evolve. A recent example is the so-called candy desk. In 1965, Senator George Murphy of California, who could also sing and dance, by the way, originated
Triple
the practice of keeping a supply of candy in his desk for the enjoyment of fellow senators. In every Congress since that time, a candy desk has been located in the back row of the Republican side on the aisle and adjacent to the chamber's most heavily used entrance. You can always stop and get some candy in the candy desk.
And Donald Trump has implemented the Tic Tac desk in the White House, and I'm not going to tell you what that's about.
Just in case you have to move on anybody.
Right. Like a bitch or any other way. I would recommend it differently.
So that's all the symbolism. The other symbolism is they've installed Mitt Romney, a replica of Mitt Romney in the Senate. It's, by all accounts, one of those audio animatronic things made by Disney. And you wind him up, and he says something very predictable.
Terrific.
He actually had a major op-ed where he was not very nice to Donald Trump.
Heard about it.
And so, of course, Trump tweeted this morning, "Here we go with Mitt Romney, but so fast, question will be, is he a flake? I hope not. Would much prefer that Mitt focus on border security and so many other things where he can be helpful. I won big and he didn't. He should be happy for all Republicans, be a team player and win."
Right.
So Trump's two tweets today, one was about Mitt Romney being a flake. Of course, we all think he's the new Jeff Flake.
Yeah.
And about how Mexico is going to pay for the wall through a trade deal that hasn't been approved yet.
Yeah. So doing good. Okay.
So, one of the fault lines in the Democratic Party and the country as a whole is going to be recognition of trade issues.
Okay.
Right? Because most Americans actually prefer free trade, just fair trade.
All right.
And so how you define that is the fault line. I say that because when Trump canceled some of the overseas trade deals, he ruined the markets for Midwest farmers. For example, 0 soybeans are now being sold to China, as one example.
Not even a single one.
0. So now they're going to buy
one soybean
wheat and other things from, Australia and other places. And so Americans lose when they don't have open markets. And the way to get open markets internationally is with agreements. That means trade agreements. So the general concept of trade agreements is something that most Americans, no matter which political party, support. And if you're going to, for example, renegotiate NAFTA and call it something else where it's still NAFTA with minor changes, Democrats really don't have a major problem with that as a concept.
Okay.
Right? The problem is Trump wants to claim it as a win.
Oh, yes.
Well, Democrats don't like giving Trump wins, but sometimes you're going to have to. He's still president. You still have to have a functioning government. So what Trump just did is gave the Democrats an opening to say, you know what, why don't we just agree with the president? It was a wonderful negotiation, and that's the money that's going to pay for his invisible wall in his mind. So you win, Mr. President. We'll accept it. Now let's move on. Reopen the government.
Well,
because after all, you already tweeted this morning. You got most of what you wanted already.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, I don't know. I never know what he's going to accept. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it. I can't even guess. He'll tell you what it is, and then you could do it, and then he wouldn't accept it. So I don't know. And I can't predict what he'll decide as a win because he could just lie.
Yeah. So really, you know, eyes will be on the new members, the Democratic members who get sworn in tomorrow. They are united, but ornery, which is wonderful. And hopefully some new blood in the House will be a big help with an experienced leader. And I think that's what we get tomorrow. And in the Senate, we get one more Republican, and that means Jeff Flake's blocking a judge's stops. He's not there, and they have another vote. And so we'll see what happens with that. I mean, it's all not going to be beating Trump. Some of it is going to be, you know, accepting what we have to live with, because until 2020 and we have a different configuration, they still control the White House and the Senate. So just, you know, making things real for as we look forward to what else is happening beyond the symbolism here. By the way, speaking of the new members, here's one person who won't be one of the new members, and that's North Carolina 9, which is not settled. It won't be Robert Pittenger, who lost the primary to Mark Harris, because Pittenger is not going to run. If there's a new election, he's out.
Okay.
You know, he's already announced, I'm not doing this.
Okay, that's all right. I'll fair enough. I don't know what else. I don't know if I feel any
the
particular way
Republicans,
about
as
him.
I understand it, and it's really hard to figure out exactly what Republicans are thinking in North Carolina.
All right, because they changed their story too.
Yeah, Republicans wanted Harris certified. Well, the Board of Elections was dissolved before that happened, so Harris is not getting certified. And Steny Hoyer has said the Democratic House, as of tomorrow, is not seating him.
Yeah, that's an easy choice.
So it won't be Robert Pittenger,
Yeah,
and it won't be Mark Harris. So now what?
tomorrow.
The North Carolina Board of Elections had to dissolve by court order, so they've done that. I'm not sure that they've reconstituted the new one, because Republicans were arguing about that and passing bills to keep the whole proceeding secret and just go ahead and make Harris the guy, and that's not going to happen. So it's a mess, and I don't really know what happens next other than the evidentiary hearing that the new board is going to do is a week from tomorrow.
Ah, okay.
Following which they'll decide what they want to do about the election, following which the Democratic House will decide what they want to do with that slot.
Yes.
Right? And the Democratic House could still say, you guys don't know what the heck you're doing, and you're cheating still by hiding all of this in the public, so we're just going to appoint the guy who ran as a Democrat.
They
can still do that.
Yes. My guess is what they
normally
feel
you don't want to do that because it doesn't look good, but what North Carolina is doing may take all of that off the table.
I agree. I would love to see that done. And it is true that the House can do that. And when they do that, they usually do some cover move.
There'll be a new special election in half a year or something.
Either that
or call for it, and it's up to North Carolina to do it.
They could do, and they could also eventually bypass it and just say McCready wins. But they would want to first tomorrow. They'll say, all right, well, they'll declare that seat vacant. More than likely, if Mark Harris shows up and tries to claim the seat,
well, that'll be theater, won't it?
Yeah, it happens from time to time, and then a Democrat will move that the gentleman stand aside. Is the magic words there, and that motion will magically carry because there's more Democrats in the House than Republicans. And then
and Harris hasn't been certified because the board dissolved before they could.
Yeah. The Republican Party changed their tune recently. You may recall that they were the spokesperson for the state party, Dallas Woodhouse, was so disturbed by the news that made it to him about what Mark Harris had done that he was vomiting. Everyone remembers. I don't know if anyone remembers. But he was talking about I don't know whether he felt like vomiting or he did vomit, but he was feeling pretty low about this whole thing. But just a couple of days ago, he was happy to announce that the chairman of the Republican Party of North Carolina was demanding the certification nonetheless. I don't know whether Dallas stopped vomiting at any point during that announcement, but he did do his job and passed that on. They didn't get the certification. Harris, I guess, could show up and say, regardless, I want the seat, because why not? I'm a Republican. I might as well just show up and demand
Why
things.
was he vomiting? Is he pregnant?
Maybe. It could be. He was so disturbed by the shenanigans.
I don't know. I saw him on TV. He didn't look very disturbed.
No,
well,
I think
he looked like a disturbed person, but he didn't
he
look
no longer,
terribly upset about this election result, other than they didn't get what they wanted.
Right. And so they can demand it. The Democrats will demand, if the guy were to show up, that he stand aside. If he's too embarrassed to show up, then he's not a Republican. But if he is too embarrassed to show up and ask for it, they'll just leave it as is and say, all right, the seat is vacant. The first time somebody shows up and asks for the seat, if it's Harris, then they will declare the seat vacant and send the case to the Committee on House Administration, which will investigate and report back. Here's what you should do. That's what you usually need to do in order to make Democrats comfortable with just seating the other guy at the end. Well,
what
here's
if it
some
takes
findings.
2 years to investigate?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it does. Sometimes it takes a long time, and that seat remains vacant. And if North Carolina doesn't like being subject to taxation without representation, then they have a special election. Yeah. Or
okay.
just, if
you
want to do it faster, certify McCready.
I mean, are they going to make an actual announcement about North Carolina 9 seat tomorrow?
They probably don't have to unless somebody shows up and asks to take the seat. If nobody shows and says they're the duly elected member, then they don't have to do anything. You just say the guy's absent. Fine, good.
So if the guy's absent, I mean, if the seat is open, does somebody then have to refer it to that committee in order for them to take a look at it? How does the process work to start saying, okay, we don't accept him? How does that work?
Oh,
Do you
well,
have to
if he
have
doesn't
him
show up, no.
And present his credentials before you turn him down? Or can you turn him down before he doesn't show up?
I guess you could turn him down before he doesn't show up. You can do whatever you want, and the committee can take up hearings on anything it wants. It might not care. I guess if the guy doesn't show up at all, then you can make note of it and say, you can refer a resolution of inquiry, I guess, to the House Administration Committee and have them start work. You might as well. You might see that tomorrow, because why waste time?
Yeah, I mean, the guy didn't show up. Maybe, when he was taking a stagecoach over to the house, he was interrupted by a highwayman, and he's never going to get here, so you don't know.
Yeah, right. Guy could, fall off.
Things could happen. So what happens if there has to be a process for fixing that?
Yeah. Well, there will be.
Because in the old days when they had an ivory gavel that worked, sometimes people didn't show up.
Yeah. When they did, they got hit. So...
except it would be hit with a mace because it would be over on the house side. But
we do have that.
All right. So, again, this is all fascinating, really.
In a way.
Using relics and using tradition. And so there are some norms that are still intact despite everything that Donald Trump has done.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll track all of that. Tomorrow we'll be able to tell what goes on, although it won't happen until after we're done, I believe, tomorrow. So we'll talk about it Friday. We'll predict it on Thursday, and you can predict it if you read the CRS reports that we'll provide to you later on. And
it'll be good watching. In a few minutes I have left, I'm going to concentrate on one article here.
Okay. And
one person. The article is a fascinating piece on the Christian right, written by Catherine Stewart, who writes regularly about the political activities of evangelicals and other religious groups. It's on the New York Times op-ed, Why Trump Reigns as King Cyrus. The Christian right doesn't like the president only for his judges. They like his style. They basically want an authoritarian. As she writes, another important thing to understand about Cyrus is that he is not a queen. In the Christian nationalist world, legitimate political power is largely male power. Mr. Drollinger insists the Bible describes only male leadership. Of course, there are those on the Christian right who have made a show of holding their noses while supporting Trump, but we're kidding ourselves if we think their continuing support is purely transactional. I have attended dozens of Christian nationalist conferences and events over the past 2 years, and while I have heard plenty of comments casting doubt on the more questionable aspects of Mr. Trump's character, the gist of the proceedings almost always comes down to the belief that he's a miracle sent straight from heaven to bring the nation back to the Lord. I've also learned that resistance to Mr. Trump is tantamount to resistance to God. This isn't the religious right we thought we knew. The Christian nationalist movement today is authoritarian, paranoid, and patriarchal at its core. They aren't fighting a culture war. They're making a direct attack on democracy itself. They want it all.
No.
And Mr. Trump, they found a man who does not merely serve their cause, but satisfies their craving for a certain kind of political leadership. So that's why the core Trump base is evangelicals. Interestingly, Jerry Falwell Jr. just tweeted something else. First of all, he was asked, is there anything President Trump could do that would endanger that support from you and other evangelical leaders? The answer is no.
What if he said you cannot have the mango?
He has a whole article here from the Washington Post about why support from evangelical leaders for Trump is unbreakable, and then goes on to say something very odd. Matt Pierce categorized this and cataloged this. Jerry Falwell Jr., a poor person, never gave anyone a job. A poor person never gave anybody charity, not of any real volume. He's making a case for American exceptionalism and how America is so strong and so powerful. We've helped everybody. And the only way that that can happen is if we're rich. So it's really, the what do you call it? The gospel of money.
The prosperity gospel.
The prosperity
he's
gospel.
Making a case for his way through the eye of that needle.
Exactly right. Or as Matt Pierce calls it, managerial evangelism.
You can get a degree in that.
Right, exactly.
MBE.
At Liberty University. So, that's all part and parcel of the background to this, where none of this stuff that happens really matters. We know that the core base of evangelicals is untouchable in terms of voting patterns. But that's never really been the point. That's always been the case since the days of Jerry Falwell Sr. You're not going to convince these folks. You just have to outvote them. And most of the time we do, except locally.
Yeah.
It's just that they're making it much more easy to do because they're losing the suburbs by declaring themselves on the side of an authoritarian patriarchy, basically. And often the case, you read this and you scratch your head and say, well, it's a little hyperbole and, a little bit going too far. No, actually, it's they themselves that are telling you this. It's right here. And that's why that article about Cyrus is so eye-opening, not for us because we are aware, but it's always nice when it's put into a form where like the average everyday reader can take a look and see for themselves. So I'll leave you with those. And that's my segment for today. We'll talk more about the actual opening of a new government tomorrow because the old one is gone as of tomorrow. They could still, resolve everything by tonight, but not happening.
If they feel like it.
And then we'll talk tomorrow about what's going to happen as the day progresses, and we'll see. And then you can sum up on Friday what actually happened.
Yeah, in case that's all different and there's no norms.
So that's your schedule for the week. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you.
This is Greg Dworkin talking with my good friend David Wall and Kagro in the Morning, a process expert for the House and Senate. And those articles are well worth watching, and so is C-SPAN, if you have the time.
Right. I don't know that I would necessarily say, I'll TiVo it and get to it later. But if you do have the time, go ahead.
Well, tune in and watch a little bit of it.
Yes.
It's important.
It is. And like I said, it explains a lot. Thanks, Greg. We explained a lot of things. I don't know if it made any more sense, but we did explain a lot of things. It really does. The opening ceremonies type stuff, it's not opening ceremonies like the Olympics or anything. Although some of that is procedural too. But a lot of this, if viewed with a good explainer, and maybe then, a couple years of studying political science in college or whatever, it explains, like, for instance, if you're the kind of person who says, what do I care what the United States House of Representatives says anyway? Well, they make the laws and we follow the laws in this country. Who says? Why them? By what authority? Well, we vote and all that. Yeah, but I mean, by what authority? This actually sort of lays it all out. And you'll see the new members arrive and the clerk of the House call the roll and ask, is everybody here? And call I guess this will be interesting. My guess is that they won't call out a name for North Carolina's 9th district. They don't go by district. They would go alphabetically. So you would never know necessarily. They'll just skip over Mark Harris, presumably. And at that point, there'll be no objection to that. But they'll call the roll and people will answer. Or I think it's actually, the roll call is actually electronic. You just put your voting card in, and this will be the first opportunity for members to do that. And some of them will screw that up, and they'll need some instruction about how to do that. And so that'll take 15 minutes to make sure everybody knows how to use the cards. They'll establish a quorum that way and get a sense of who might be missing and take a guess or two at what those reasons may be. And at that point, it may very well be some members are still having swearing-in parties in their offices and haven't made it all the way to the floor, some of whom are new and they get confused and lost on the way, some of whom are old hands and they say, who cares, I'm going to stay here and eat more food or have another cup of coffee. No reason for me to go to the floor and be a part of the quorum. They're going to have a quorum. I'll get there when they get around to the speaker's election, and that's not first. Anyway, point is, you'll see them say, all right, everybody who claims to be a member of the House, come on in here and say you're here. And then, should we go through it or should we just let everybody, probably everybody should read it on their own, what happens on the first day of the House. But the quick and dirty, I'll read you the executive summary, right? Why are they gathering tomorrow? Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution says they're going to get together and reconstitute the House and that the Congress will do it at noon on January 3rd, period. Unless, of course, that's not period. Unless the preceding Congress by law designates a different day. And from time to time that has happened when, for instance, January 3rd will fall on a Sunday or otherwise inconvenient day. I think in 2015, here it is right here in the top. 2015, they set January 6th as the date where they started, Anyway, they're going to go with January 3rd this year. There's no reason not to do it on a Thursday. And as it says here, although no officers will have been elected when the House first convenes, officers from the previous Congress, despite the fact that it will have been officially dissolved, do perform certain functions, such as conducting the election of the Speaker. I think we actually discussed this. The clerk of the House runs things until the Speaker is elected. The clerk of the House, though, will have been hired by the previous Speaker, Paul Ryan, who was a fascist jerk. And so you wonder, how trustworthy is this clerk? Well, for the most part, they don't have that much to do, but I guess if somebody wanted to create havoc around the actual election of the Speaker, it would be up to the clerk to make the calls as to how to handle that. And if it's a Paul Ryan clerk, if they had hired some kind of incredible super jerk of a clerk, which is always possible with Ryan, but it hasn't actually borne out to be the case, they could create real chaos around a controversial speaker election, I guess. But what they'll normally do and what we expect for Thursday, call to order by the clerk. Next thing up, a prayer, which, maybe you're a First Amendment kind of person and you're like, but that shouldn't be what happens. Well, that's the way we do it. I don't know why. We just do. A prayer led by the chaplain of the House, also an official, officer of the House, and a pledge of allegiance because, gosh, nobody's really sure what country these newly elected members of Congress are allegiant to, I guess, also led by the clerk, and then the quorum call ordered by the clerk, and then the election of the Speaker, also ordered by the clerk and conducted with the assistance of tellers. Usually those are, of course, members of the House, or I guess at that point, purported members of the House who are appointed to make sure the counting is done correctly. Then you vote, and they call you by name, and you shout out who you're voting for. It's not a yes-no sort of thing. You got to give a name, or you can say present, or you can hide and not be present. That's also a possibility. But that was part of the problem for people who were opposing or were musing over opposing Pelosi, right? Who are you going to vote for? Well, I don't know exactly. Well, you got to shout something out. You can't say not Pelosi. And also, it doesn't mean that you're voting for Kevin McCarthy because you oppose Pelosi. You could just vote for another Democrat or anyone. People are fond of reminding us from time to time there's no constitutional requirement that the Speaker of the House be a member of the House. Has always been a member of the House. No one has ever come close to seriously nominating or electing a person who was not a member of the House, though votes have been cast for people who were not members. That's just somebody saying, I don't like the current speaker who's going to win, so I'm going to vote for someone else. All right, so they have that speaker election, and then, of course, the speaker is sworn in, and I guess sworn in by, how do they do the swearing in? The speaker-elect is sworn, yes, the dean of the House does the swearing in, not the clerk. Dean of the House would be the longest-serving member of the House, who is, I don't know right now. We'll look that up. You want to know? Let's find out, because we're in a Google society here. Dean of the House. Dean of the House of Representatives, just to make sure we get the right one. Current dean is Don Young. Is he still in Congress? Did he get reelected again? I don't even, remember whether he was being replaced or not. Anyway, it's time for our next break. But the longest serving member of the House does the swearing in of the Speaker. Speaker makes some remarks at that point. And then they begin on the business of the House. And this is really actually relevant because we're running up to the first order of business for the new Speaker is then to swear in the new members of the House. If it's at that point where if Mark Harris were to show up or sneak in or something like that, we'd have to keep an eye out for that. And you would have to stand up and object and ask that he stand aside and not take the oath. All of those sworn in then are members of the House, and then you get on to the business of adopting the new rules for the House of Representatives. And that is the topic in the news today. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'll have to reply. Apparently, let's see. I had said during Greg's segment that maybe we needed to raise this issue possibly, as Donald Trump had been tweeting that Mexico was going to be paying for the wall through the new USMCA trade deal, which isn't actually in place. I wanted to note for the record that, we just lost all of the USMCA wall money in unsold soybeans. All of the money has gone out the window. So I guess we're stuck. And somebody asked what we're going to do with all the soybeans. And I said, I go pile them up on the border, I guess. And I've been asked here now separately by the rude pundit asking, can we build the wall out of soybeans? And I suppose we could, but how will we see through them in order to make sure we don't get hit in the head with drugs is the real problem here. And remember, that's actually supposed to be one of the requirements for doing this. So, I don't know. We get hit in the head with by drug flingers, I guess. I don't know. That might be disqualifying, and we might not be able to do that. And we need something transparent, as we know. Okay. Oh, soybean slats. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, that could be it. All right, where were we? We were talking about the beginning of the first day of the House. Before I get on to the rules issue, like I said, I would, if you have the time, go ahead and watch it. And if you miss it, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily TiVo it. But if you wanted to see it, C-SPAN does have a video archive. And if you just can't wait to see what it really looks like until tomorrow, you can look in C-SPAN's online video archives at, and search for video from January 3rd of any odd numbered year, except 2015, because then you're looking for January 6th. Don't make that mistake. But you can search by date in their online video archive. It's not the fastest moving thing in the world, as you can imagine. It's just hours and hours and hours of a very boring video, mostly. But you can take a look at any opening day by looking at January 3rd, 2013, 2017, 2013, did I say 13 right? 11, but not January 3rd, 2015. Again, please, that would be January 6th. I've made that clear, people. And watch what happens. And what happens when you get to watch that is you see step by step how the claim of authority to act on behalf of the people of the United States, this actually works. They'll cite their, what they're doing, the statutory or constitutional authority for it, and you'll see that the clerk of the House calls them in and takes the roll, and they're only calling the names. They probably won't call Harris, like I said, because they'll only be calling the names of people for whom election certificates have arrived and about which there is no question. What they're going to do with Maine's 2nd District election certificate, since it's been defaced by Paul LePage, who wrote "stolen election" on his signature line, I don't know, but I think they'll probably just ignore that, like everybody should be ignoring Paul LePage. Although sometimes somebody that crazy, you ignore it at your own peril, and then they end up as vice president somewhere along the line, and you don't know what to do about it. But everybody's name will be called who has presented a valid certificate of election. They say, yes, we're here. The fact that you're here, good. That gives us a quorum. We can check the Constitution. It says how many people do we need for that. That's half of the body, 218, though we're missing North Carolina 09, but I still think 218 would be a majority of 434 members of the House. They won't be counting the delegates and resident commissioner from Puerto Rico because they are not representatives and they don't represent states, and we only do that with 435 of them. They'll be around. They can vote in the committee of the whole sometimes under democratic rules, but we're not in that. We're in the whole House. You can tell that because the mace is there. See, there's a point to all of this, right? And then, having established that they have a quorum, they say, all right, fine. So now you people are about to become the House of Representatives for the 116th Congress. But first, you have to be sworn in. But in order for you to be sworn in, the oath has to be administered to you by the House Speaker. In order for us to have a House Speaker to swear you in, we got to have a vote. So there's a little bit of a paradox there. How can we count on the legitimacy of the Speaker of the House, who is, after all, a constitutional officer, third in line, well, I guess second in line to the succession to the presidency? The president is already the president. He's not in line. But it's interesting. How do you select that person? Well, the members of the House of Representatives elect them. Oh, yeah? Well, they're not members of the House of Representatives when they elect the person. They're only members of the House of Representatives after that person they elect swears them in. So a little bit of a conundrum there. But that's how they work it, because how else are you going to do it? You could swear. I actually think it would make more sense if the clerk swore everybody in, and then once sworn in, they elected a speaker. But for whatever reason, they decided to go the other direction. I'm sure there's a reason for it. I don't know what it is. There's probably some fascinating writing on it. The clerk will find out if everybody's there, if enough of them are there. Hold the election for speaker. Speaker gets sworn in by clerk. Speaker then swears in the dean of the House swears in the speaker. The speaker swears in everybody else. And then they say, okay, we need rules to run this thing. Technically, there are no rules in place right then and there. But what they very often will do is they'll say, to save time, instead of writing all of our rules by hand from scratch, we'll say, for the most part, the rules of the last Congress were pretty good, but we have some changes to make. So usually what gets put forward is the majority says, we have a package of rules. It's everything that we had last year with the following changes, and then a list of them. And then there is a vote. Yes, no, maybe, on whether or not to adopt the rules package. Sometimes it's controversial, sometimes not. Sometimes the changes that are made are controversial, sometimes not. Ordinarily, what ends up happening is, for lack of a set of rules in place, it is said, and this is on, if you really go in depth, beyond the executive summary of what happens on the first day of the House, you'll find on page 9, adoption of House Rules of Procedure. So at this point, the next order of business is the adoption of the rules of the House. Although the rules of one House do not carry over to the next House, a newly elected House typically approves its rules by adopting the rules of the previous Congress with specific amendments. Okay? And those amendments have been worked out ahead of time, typically by senior leadership of the majority, sometimes with some input from less senior folks. And this time around, we have a package that's, more or less run-of-the-mill and normal, but in one particular case, there is an issue. And this, too, inclusion of this is run-of-the-mill and typical, but we should be getting away from doing this. And it is the adoption of pay-go rules, pay-as-you-go rules, a budgetary mechanism self-imposed through House rules. Essentially you've heard it before. Every time you propose a new program, people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, they decided at one point that if we just put that in the rules and say nothing that hasn't got a pay for, as they call it, an offset somewhere in the budget or some tax measure that you propose in order to raise that money, then you don't get to consider the bill. David Dayen has written extensively on this, and a number of people have, and he's been tweeting about it this morning and yesterday, saying, here his tweet from yesterday, well, I tried, but pay-go remains in the rules for the 116th Congress, albeit with some exemptions. And this, according to a screen grab he took from, I guess, the House Rules Committee's statement of the changes that they want to see made as between last Congress and this one. The pay-as-you-go point of order, reinstated here. You don't really need to know that it's in subsection EE, but it is. Reinstates the pay-go rule from the 111th Congress, with changes to conform with the recent practice of tying the measurement timeline to the calendar year rather than the last completed budget resolution. A little bit of jargon there. But as in the 111th Congress, this provision establishes a point of order against any measure that has a net effect of increasing the deficit or reducing the surplus for the current fiscal year, the budget year, and up to 9 fiscal years following that budget year. It's actually pretty annoying and difficult. The subsection stipulates that the net budgetary effects of the measure will be determined by the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, but provides that if a measure is considered pursuant to a special order, a special rule, that instructs the clerk of the House to add the measure to another measure passed by the House, then the net budgetary effect of the entire package will be considered. So there's no sneaky way around it. In other words, finally, the subsection provides for exemptions given an emergency designation. So you can make emergency appropriations. Disaster relief is what usually gets that designation, which is what makes a disaster relief bill something of what they call a Christmas tree bill. Everyone wants to hang little amendments, little ornaments on a Christmas tree bill on the way through the House, especially if it's got an emergency designation. Got something you want to pass but can't come up with a pay for it, or just can't get past the pay-go rules, hanging on an emergency appropriations bill. So very often you'll see emergency appropriations bill for disaster relief being complained about by budget hawks as being full of pork. And it's not necessarily, sometimes it is the case that they say this, but it's not necessarily the case that they mean that disaster relief is pork. They just mean that, sure, there's $12 million, $15 million, $150 million. I don't know who would do 12 or 15 these days. $150 million for disaster relief for whatever, Pismo Beach, right? And, but also for some strange reason, $8 million for a new program, to open a Big Brothers and Sisters Center in Houston, Texas, which might be a great idea, but it's something that people got stuck with before and couldn't get past PAYGO or didn't want to try. And for whatever reason, they are able to pull strings and get that tossed into a bill that's about emergency appropriations. And it's protected by rule, and you can't get it out. Anyway, David Dayen is approaching it actually from the other side of the coin, really, which is to say basically that some of the bolder proposals that are supported by a wide variety of Democrats, and a great number of them. For instance, very often people come back to the example of Medicaid for all, or anything else. Low cost, lowering the cost of college tuition, make free college, whatever it is that people are proposing, that people usually get up in arms and yell about, how will you pay for this? Well, very often, actually, the people who are proposing it say, no, I actually think we have the costs covered. Sometimes they just say, how do we pay for it? I don't think you understand. We're a sovereign nation. We kind of designate our own currency. We can just not print more money per se, but it doesn't matter that we're deficit spending. That would be the modern monetary theory folks. And we've had that explained to us rather extensively from time to time, and maybe it's time for a refresher, from Arliss Bunny and others. Here it matters. But although a lot of people do say, well, my proposal for Medicaid for all is actually, it's paid for not by cutting some other budget line or by raising taxes, but, in part the savings we get net to the various federal medical programs for which we're paying too much because people wait too long for their care, etc. And some of it is tax, some of it's not, some of it is reprogramming other, I guess it would be sort of a budget cut from other areas, but they certainly say we have the money to do it, but we can't even begin to consider the legislation because it gets run down each time by PAYGO rules, or at least the claim is that it can be run down by PAYGO rules. And sometimes you disagree with the assessment of the Congressional Budget Office, or sometimes senior leadership disagrees with the assessment of the Congressional Budget Office, and you end up fighting about whether or not this thing can go to the floor. So there's a lot of talk, anyway, among some of the progressive Democrats in the caucus that this PAYGO rule doesn't belong in the new rules package. And there's some discussion, therefore, of trying to find enough members, and in this case, 18 or so would do the trick, right, to vote no on the rules package, which in the ordinary course of things, voting no and defeating for instance, the special order rule for any bill that you're considering. Defeating the rule for the bill causes serious headache, and sometimes ends up meaning that the majority, at least for some portion of the day, essentially cedes control of the floor to the minority, who then, depending on the procedural situation that you're in, is entitled to an hour of floor time to offer their own rule for a bill or their own rules package, as the case may be. And on the opening day, the Republicans, the minority will sometimes make their own rules package proposal. They don't often put a great deal of work into it because it's doomed to defeat. They know this because they're the minority, but sometimes you're trying to make a political point, and there's something that's particularly embarrassing that you think would make for a great rule that the majority isn't willing to consider, and you think on C-SPAN, the American public watching will say, why wouldn't they put that in the rules? That's crazy. Look at all these people voting no on this thing. There's always opportunities to do that. Anyway, so this morning I see Ro Khanna. Where does he put his emphasis? In Khanna or Khanna in his last name? He is, Democrat from California, and he's out here this morning saying, I'm not going to vote yes on a rules package with PAYGO rules in it. David, like I said, David Davin's explanation of it, I guess we can run through it in a few minutes in case you're more concerned about what is this rule. He's saying here, after showing us the Rules Committee's write-up on their version, the new version of PAYGO, he says, to deficit spend, it would have to be called an emergency. Well, we have a climate emergency, so we could use that as an excuse to put that. Joan McCarter, excellent. As a matter of fact, this is maybe this is just the discussion we ought to be having. Hi, Joan, how are you? Happy New Year.
Hello, David. I'm good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Okay. Thank you. Metaphorically speaking, we're good. This today gives us a good opportunity to talk about House and Senate procedure today. I don't know if that's actually what we want to linger over, but I woke up this morning to seeing on Twitter a movement on to try and gather votes against including PAYGO in the House rules package. And while I wish that it was not in there, I'm trying to work out in my head whether or not I think this is unfortunately not a great idea. Like, say, unless this is all worked out in advance, the idea of I'm going to show up tomorrow and the Democrats are going to lose the first floor vote of the new Congress is not often a great thing to do. But sometimes threatening it is enough to get people to say, well, if we pull the PAYGO rule and vote on it separately, then we'll pass our rules package and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So we can do that. We can work it out. But sometimes this is where the Rules Committee flexes its muscle first and they say, well, we could do that, but we're not going to because we here on the Rules Committee all love PAYGO. And tonight we'll have a meeting that will explain in no uncertain terms what's going to happen to you if you screw this up tomorrow. And very often that makes people say either that, and it's usually also accompanied with, well, look, also there are some terrific benefits for doing this. And I think you either they'll claim misunderstand PAYGO, or it's not so bad, or we can amend it later. Let's have a talk about it. Let's have hearings on it. Usually you don't come out of the other end of that with, we'll have hearings on it and a fair hearing and then some votes and, I lost all of the votes. Damn. Okay. Well, but that happens. But yeah, I'm not so positive that everybody knows exactly what it means to say, I'll just vote no on that.
Right.
So
and
we'll
I
find
think
out.
that they'll learn.
Yeah.
Although Khanna has been there long enough that he should sort of get it.
Right. So and it may be.
But he's also, he likes to posture.
Yeah.
We'll say that about him.
He's not been there as a member of a majority.
No.
And that's one of the other problems. And I hate to.
I'm of two minds here, and I'm ambivalent. Need to talk it out to figure out what I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because in reality, does it make a difference this Congress to have the PAYGO rules in effect? Probably not.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very hard to see Mitch McConnell's Senate passing anything at all that is a Pelosi priority.
Right.
Medicaid for all is not going to be happening with Mitch McConnell in charge of the Senate. On the other hand, we've got to get rid of PAYGO. And I would like to see the Democratic House take a stand against it now to say, okay, we're done with this. We're moving on from this deficit obsession.
Yeah.
It's time to stop it.
And now may be a great time.
Got to fix things.
It might be a perfect time for that. It's like, well, if you're really a deficit hawk, don't worry about it because nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Or let's get rid of PAYGO. Oh, but then you'll pass all sorts of things. Yeah, we will. They won't. And, and we'll be able to run on them. And then we can have an election on whether or not we want to PAYGO everything to death. But for now, this is a great time to do it. The risk
if we
of
had a history of Democrats using PAYGO to argue for tax increases.
Mm-hmm. If we did.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or the repeal of tax cuts. But unfortunately, we don't have a history of Democrats doing that with PAYGO.
Yeah. It's a bad idea, and it doesn't belong in there. And it's fine to spend the last couple desperate hours possibly, putting together something that might change minds and say, all right, fine. If this is really going to be a disaster, let's get rid of the PAYGO thing. But they're going to talk your ear off about why it's worth it. And I'm not sure it's really worth it. Unfortunately, I think it comes down to, well, if we have PAYGO, then Republicans can't accuse us of being tax and spend liberals. And most new members will say, of course they can. They have been doing it forever. You were a member of Congress when they were doing it. I was just a regular person.
Gonna do
How
that.
could you not know this?
They're just going to do that.
Yeah.
Get over it and move on.
Yeah. So.
Because the American people have.
Yeah. And, right. And they're not going to mind. They don't know anything about this. And if they hear about it, they'll probably say, yeah, that is kind of dumb for the moment. Unfortunately, I think the way it stands is if they insist for whatever reason and tomorrow arrives and the question is there's one and only majority rules package on the floor and it's yes or no, it does make things tough. However, if they haven't adopted the rules yet, they will be working under open rules and the 5-minute rule. And somebody should be able to offer an amendment on the fly to strike out the PAYGO stuff. But you should really be fixing that, off the floor so that the first vote of the new, you're setting yourself up for that same situation. The first thing you do is the new Democrats come in and say, get rid of that rule that has that nice name, PAYGO, that at first blush is responsible looking. It's fiscally responsible looking.
Yeah.
It's a mask, but the first thing you'll do is tear the mask off and then, but even if you don't, Republicans will still say the same exact thing about you. So what do you do? I don't know. But, hopefully, I guess we can cross our fingers and say, if, 25, 30 new Democrats say, we don't care if the place is in chaos. I don't know if that's a good thing, but they might actually get that concession, or they might find out really fast how you get your legs broken in Congress, which is not a good thing.
I think looking at the team that's still in leadership, yeah. Pelosi's commitment to PAYGO has always irritated me. Mm-hmm. But whether that's Pelosi really thinking this is a thing or not wanting to pick that particular fight with Steny Hoyer or Clyburn, I don't know. I don't know where it's coming from with Pelosi.
Man. I think just there was a time back in the day where it was like, yeah, we're going to look fiscally responsible and everybody wants that mantle. That was back in whenever. And then
when everybody was still pretending the Republicans were the party of fiscal responsibility, I guess.
Right, I guess. And now it's obvious that they're not, but we still haven't quite gotten there yet. The new people will know that better for some reason than the old, even though it's like, you were the ones being attacked. You didn't notice how it went?
Yeah. Because they're friends with these guys? I don't know. Not
sure. But mixed feelings, and it's like, well, you do have to realize there is a team play obligation here. Yeah. But
and does the team play obligation right now in the middle of a shutdown with Trump in the White House, does it override the political positioning, the smart political positioning for 2020?
Yeah.
And the importance of moving the Democratic Party on?
It should not. But Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the tough thing. That'll be the fight that they have during meetings tonight and probably right through breakfast tomorrow.
Probably.
Okay.
When they're not, with Pelosi absent, being at the White House talking to Trump about border security.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming up on our last break, but then we can use that to regroup and figure out other things to talk about. But this is the talk of the morning, so we're on point, I think. And we'll have to figure out how they settle this, and you won't know. But it looks like we won't know until tomorrow. But it looks like people will spend the day trying to collect the whip count via Twitter today. And I will tell you this: Nancy Pelosi's operation is better than that, and might surprise you and beat you. You might get 30 people together today, and then tomorrow you have 11.
Yep.
All right, we'll be right back after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, a little bit of a surprise for me in the middle of the break because I hit the wrong button and ran out of music. I realized, I think we need to rearrange these. Okay, so anyway, we're still here with Joan McCarter, still talking about opening day of the new Congress. There are a couple other issues hanging out there, but it's going to be contentious right away, and that's too bad, but people will learn some interesting lessons about who stands where and how things work, and that'll probably result in some tension for the new members, and we'll hear about it almost immediately, I would think, among others. There have been some other vocal members too, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez among the more vocal and connected. And so using social media to let everybody know what tensions the new members are encountering right away, and it's very educational. Sometimes frustrating.
Is probably in the long run a good thing. I mean,
yes.
it's how it's going to work from now on.
Right. There's no reason, and even if it's a bad thing, too bad. That's the way it's going to be. You're right.
Yeah. If it forces the rest of the team to learn how to use social media, good.
And it is, and to somewhat hilarious effect, everyone thinks the way to do it is cooking or eating in their kitchen and talking on Instagram, which, all right, she didn't, Alexandria Ocasio, AOC, as they call her for short, didn't invent it, I don't think, but she was the first person I saw to do it from Congress regularly. And now everybody's like, oh, that's what the youngs want. All right. So everybody's doing it. But yes, she's been, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but the Green New Deal Committee issues are mounting. So I think there's going to be a lot of venting of frustration in the next couple of days. And okay, that's the way it's going to be.
And a bit of a learning curve, I think. Again, some of this I think is going to be helpful. Some of it, I think, will bring everybody along. It'll teach them. It will sort of wake up slightly stodgy leadership. Not that Nancy Pelosi is stodgy, but her team definitely so.
Yeah.
If it wakes the new Democratic House majority up to certain new realities, I'm fine with that. If it gets in the way of fighting Trump, that's where we have a problem.
Yeah. And Trump will exploit anything, so it's not the case that we have to have lockstep unity all the time, because even if we did, he would say, no, they don't, and lie. So I suppose it doesn't make, we shouldn't worry too much about that. But yeah, you wouldn't want to say, lose sight of who the real enemy is and say, well, I'm going to sabotage some democratic thing because I got to show you, that we can do it. And you got to listen. I mean, sometimes there'll be appropriate areas to leverage your votes, but you wouldn't want to pull the plug on everything and say, to hell with all things, if we don't fight Trump my way every day. Mm-hmm. But, I would expect that every member, you always have a few rare exceptions, they all know how important the job is, and
yes,
and they know they lose sometimes. I mean, you can't really have made it all the way to Congress without having experience. Yes, I won, but some days I lost or felt I had to compromise.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about that. And I also hope that there's an opportunity here, learning experience for real, for everybody, not only waking up the stodgy leadership, but an opportunity to, for people to say, as we could here with the Green New Deal committee, like, supposing we actually wanted to have this thing, and setting aside the argument about whether it should exist or not.
I have to admit, I was dismantling Christmas yesterday, so I did not follow the news. I don't know what the Green New Deal problem is. The
current round of frustration over it stems from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez telling what's going, just updating everybody, but putting it very succinctly and saying, look, we made 3 demands for this committee. 1, no fossil fuel money on the committee. If you're taking fossil fuel money, you can't be on this committee. And I can't even remember what 2 and 3 was. They were spending so much time on 2 and 3. But 2 was, discussing issues of relevance to affected communities. Well, that sounds fine, right? Mm-hmm. And then let's see. I'll have to sort of scroll back, but there was all pretty straightforward things in that we've heard them before. But the big issue was with the that I took up with anyway. Was the no fossil fuel money thing, which I love as an idea, but can't figure out how to implement. But she listed these 3 very simple demands and then said they were all rejected as, quote, too controversial, which doesn't really, I don't think, tell the whole story of why they were rejected and whether there's a way around that rejection. And so my hope for the educational part of it is that we say, so, okay, let's say we wanted to make this thing happen. What are the controversies and how do we mitigate them? Yeah. And if you begin by saying, all right, well, the first one on the list happened to be no fossil fuel money. This one is difficult. How do you make it so that by rule, as you say, you want it, no one can serve on this committee if they take fossil fuel money. And if you begin to construct that,
you get to the definition of fossil fuel money.
Yes, right.
Like,
what is
David Sorota's expansion of that issue into people who are employed in the industry.
There is that. That's right away will become an issue. Sure.
Yeah. And if you're looking at communities that are particularly affected, are you going to say members from Texas, members from Oklahoma, members from wherever?
Yeah. I mean, those are impacted communities. I think she was, of course, here's her list, was no fossil fuel money on climate committee. 2 was offer solutions for impacted communities. I think everybody's going to want that. That's broad enough. Good. I don't see how that's controversial. And people said, and I think that was the design. I think number 1 was the controversial one. Yes. But she lists 1, 2, 3, and then says all 3 were rejected as too controversial, which I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if they were all too controversial. I don't know if the words too controversial came up. The 3rd one was draft sample Green New Deal. Well, that's not controversial if the committee is the Green New Deal committee. That would not be.
Yeah.
So my suspicion is number 1 is the one that's too controversial, and that it wasn't so much that it's controversial as it is difficult or possibly impossible to implement.
Yeah.
But, you took that to mean too controversial. And as I said yesterday about it, I was like, that's, when you run into people who say, this activist was arrested for telling the truth. Well, is that why they were arrested? What's the charge? You know what I mean? Yeah. So a bit of a rhetorical game, but worth playing, it being a big deal, the climate crisis. But yeah, so no fossil fuel money, right? Like you said, first issue, somebody who works for Exxon, it depends what they do. As CEO of Exxon feels like oil money. A chemist who happens to work at Exxon, is it oil money? I don't know. It may be. Maybe it depends on who they are and what they do, but that's the problem. And what do you do when you discover that somebody has given money to an otherwise good environmentalist and progressive who's on the Green New Deal committee, and it turns out, this donation came from the spouse of a chemist for ConocoPhillips.
Right.
So literally, what do I do?
Is that fossil fuel money? Mm-hmm.
And if it is,
probably.
Let's say yes. What do I do with the person?
Salary of somebody. Yeah.
You're off the committee. And just like, oh, I'm sorry, but does anybody know the mechanics of saying that somebody's no longer on the committee? That means going to the House floor, passing a resolution, changing the composition of the committee, which isn't ordinarily complicated or controversial, but with A, Trump in office, B, everybody gunning for poor AOC here, people will want to make trouble about that. So right from the start, defining what is fossil fuel money is problematic and hard. Can it be done? Sure. Have people tried to do it? Are there trusted partners with whom I would be thrilled to work to make that list? Yes. But it also means, does anybody expect, say, Republicans to comply with any of that? And no, they all take something that you would think is fossil fuel money. So you're talking about either having a rule that says this committee will have 0 members of the minority on it, which is going to make a problem. You could do it, but it could make a problem. Or there's a rule on this committee, and it doesn't apply to Republicans and does apply to Democrats. And maybe you'd even be willing to live with that because the composition of the committee would be the same either way. But it's a weird way to start.
It's a weird way to start.
Yeah. So there's a lot to it, and just the mechanics of building a committee. You got to go to the floor and pass a resolution that says these are the people that are going to be on it. And at what point do you say that? And is it a committee rule that you can't take fossil fuel money, or is it supposed to be in the House rules, or what? Because you got till tomorrow to do that.
Story. And, we also don't know exactly what. You can't give all of the context on Twitter, so we don't know what happened in that meeting.
Yes.
We don't know the tenor of those discussions.
And she could be taking
what really is, unrealistic versus controversial.
Right. And she could be taking perfectly normal liberties and saying, well, okay, they didn't say, quote, too controversial. And, I understand that. That's what a normal person would come out and tweet in 200 and whatever characters you have. What did you really hear? Or maybe they used those words. Were they the wrong words? Are they wrong about that? That could be. You talked to somebody who was not articulate. That could be. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not certain how to work this thing, and I've gotten my head around the idea of having a select committee that only works on this thing called the Green New Deal, whatever that may be. And all right, you can actually constitute a committee that works on one legislative package only. No reason you can't. It's unusual, but it can be done. That's not a problem. I don't know if you'll get enough votes for it, but then again, I don't know. I don't know what happens if it's still a closely divided House, with plenty of conservative Democrats. Are there 218 votes for a committee with no Republicans allowed? I don't know.
It's not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ultimate thing about it. But, it could certainly be a Democratic caucus rule that we won't put members on that committee who take oil and gas money, and then the Democrats on that committee wouldn't have that. And the effect would be fine, because let's say you put all the worst offenders the Republicans have to offer on the committee. They'll still be in the minority, and you'll win every vote, and you'll get...
Right.
So how about that? Let's make it that way.
And can you call it a committee if it doesn't have Republican members on it? No, not really. Then it's unless it's like the Republican Study Committee.
Yeah, I
not
can
an
call it
actual
that.
official committee, but a caucus.
I mean, normally they would do that.
Caucus.
You absolutely could power it through, and just if you held every vote in the caucus together, just punch the Republicans in the face and say, here's a real committee with none of you on it. But I imagine there will be some more of those next time Republicans take over the House.
Has that happened before?
I don't think so. I really doubt it.
I don't know if that's necessarily the precedent to start and the hill to die on.
No, it shouldn't be. And you should say, like I say, go ahead, put as many Republicans on it as you want. Just make sure you put more Democrats on it, which will be the normal case for any committee.
Because it's majority.
Yeah, that it's supposed to be that way. You don't have to be embarrassed about that. Give yourself 2, 3, 4 seat majority on it, and hold your people together, and you can still do whatever you want. And you don't have, and you'll probably have plenty of Democrats willing to serve that don't take oil or fossil fuel money. That's fine. But imposing that on the other side is, they're going to have to kind of come to that conclusion themselves, I guess. Otherwise, I don't know. Untold resources are now dedicated to policing every donation, lest you violate the House rules and be ejected.
I'm kind of more hung up on the affected communities issue.
Okay.
And whether, what part of affected communities are we looking at? Because, if they're wanting to include members from those energy producing states, they need to be there to be in on the discussion of how the Green New Deal affects their constituencies who may be employed in the fossil fuel industry. So
I'm not too sure what,
but we don't know.
It meant.
We don't know. Just speculating.
Yeah, it's a tweet, and I can't be sure. And there's more tweets to it. And there may be more clarity to be had. And if you called the office and got a statement on it, I would find out more. I think that what was being offered here was the idea of offering solutions for impacted communities. A lot of people immediately went to, they said, for instance, environmental justice issues. That should absolutely be in there. It's a great demand and has to be respected as a part of the committee's jurisdiction. So that one sounds good. And then people say, well, what if that was rejected as too controversial? Well, then I would say you're right. It's not too controversial. It's a good one. But it says all three. So I was just starting with number one. I have a huge issue with that. I love the idea as a caucus rule. It would be, I say it would be great. It could be terrible. We may find out later, and you might want to, that's okay. Start out with a rule that sounds great and amend it along the way as necessary. People do it all the time. So, but yeah, I mean, if it's a flat thing like, well, what's the name of the, I can't recall the environmental group that was protesting in favor of this thing that she joined a couple weeks ago in protesting in Pelosi's office. Sunrise, was that it?
I don't remember.
I can't remember either now. But I guess this is where you have to sit down and say, what does this thing mean? And realize that when we hammer it out in a way that works, when you leave this office, the fact that a change has happened, your rank and file is going to say you sold out to the establishment. Are you okay with this? You didn't. We just made something that worked, but they're going to say, yeah, you're a sellout, and they're going to try to replace you, and you're going to have to fight to retain your leadership in this movement, and you'll find out what it's all about and what we have to do every day. And it's good for you to learn that, but it could, if it's a no compromise kind of a thing, and I'm a little worried about that as a possibility, because when you talk about this, I get a lot of response. It's just online. People yell at each other all the time, but a lot of like, it's an existential crisis. I agree. It is.
It is
no,
an existential
no question.
crisis.
We have to do it this way. We can do part of it, but we can't make climate denier idiots forego oil money because you want to. They don't want to. I mean, we could, but I don't know how to constitute a committee with both Democrats and Republicans in which we'll trounce Republicans regularly as a matter of routine. That is the plan. But they, unless you're ready to get down there and make the speech and see if there's 218 votes for the first committee that doesn't allow any members of the minority because they're dirty, dirty bastards. Go ahead. I might even vote for it. Because I agree. But it is weird and different. And I don't know. Here's another thing. Let me sit down the Green New Deal people and the PAYGO people and say, this is both going to happen on day one. One, no Republicans are allowed on our world-changing committee. And two, we're throwing out the rule where you have to pay for things. Whew. All right. I mean, I can defend those things, and we have 2 years to do it, but that's a commercial.
Yeah.
It's going to happen anyway, but they'll have you in the footage. What do you think? You think you both want to do that tomorrow, or maybe just you? Just PAYGO, and this is when we leave for later? Okay. And again, maybe that's a good compromise. They'll tell you sold out, but it's a good compromise.
Well, we have to think hard about this, and I have to think hard about this.
We got one day.
We have one day. I know. And anything I write is not going to make too much difference to anybody. But on a wholly different note, there's one thing I want to highlight, and that is the excellent profile of a sadly dying Harry Reid in the New York Times today.
Yeah, I saw about it. I haven't not read it, but I thought that would make a good take a glance at that one. Okay, tell us what's going on.
I just refer people to that. It's
all right. You have
seeing
to read it yourself.
Reid left largely because of health issues.
Yeah.
We didn't know how serious they were at the time. You could tell that he was not recovering well from his injury.
Yeah.
From
true.
the fall that he took. He was blinded in one eye and was sort of frail after that. Ended up having some back surgeries, it turns out, and now has pancreatic cancer. Back at Netroots Nation, I had heard from his staff, his former staff, that they had thought they'd caught it really early enough through a colonoscopy that he could be treated, but they didn't. So it's apparently down 2 weeks. Possibly months.
Wow. All right.
So he's sort of not entirely unburdening himself, but slightly. And what he has to say about Trump and what he doesn't have to say about Schumer is interesting and worth reading, just to remember what Harry Reid accomplished, how he responded to fights, how he responded to fights with us, and what he accomplished. So I commend that article to folks.
All right. So I would like to read that.
It makes you really sad.
I can imagine. I did enjoy seeing that one of the entries in the description, or maybe the subheader, was about why he didn't regret ending the filibuster for judicial appointments.
Exactly.
So I was hopeful I would read about that.
I every time I see somebody tweet about, boy, Harry Reid screwed that one up. No, there would be no Obama judges. On the judiciary had Reid not done that.
Yeah.
He had. There wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
Maybe we ended up with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh because of it, but we also ended up with a lot of very good, particularly on the the First District Court of Appeals in D.C. We ended up with some very good justices there, judges rather.
Yeah, and we didn't get Gorsuch and I'm already forgetting his name, Kavanaugh. Because of it, we got them because they did exactly what we told you they were going to do, whether we did this or not, which is change them again as soon as they need it.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we won't do it because we don't want to end up with them. All right, fine. So you get 0 judges, and they'll get, not only the 100 they were going to name, but the 200 you haven't. So, all right. Well, I'm glad they.
Now let's just hope Mitch McConnell gets rid of the legislative filibuster, because with a Democratic House, this would be a really good time for that to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Trump's bidding, Mitch.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Exactly. Should have done it last week when he asked you.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, Mitch McConnell reads the newspapers and thought it was a bad idea because it's a Democratic House coming. And so, okay.
Rats.
Right. But the president, the genius, the political genius, who showed them all that he knew better than they did, up to last week was saying, get rid of it. After the election, he's saying, get rid of the filibuster. So
I don't know that he necessarily thinks things through.
He may not. All right. Let's see. Any other? I mean, I guess really at this point, as far as the Congress beat goes, there isn't one. So we sit and
there
wait.
Isn't one. Although I was thinking about this morning, looking at Paul Ryan's total abandonment of Congress. Mm-hmm. Not really from the time he decided he wasn't going to run for re-election.
Yeah.
The only thing he really put any effort into was making sure Kevin McCarthy was going to be majority leader or minority leader now.
Yes.
And his highlights reel.
Yeah.
That the week before
That's
Christmas.
Really it. Wow. That's.
But it made me think, just like Trump has sort of redeemed Bush in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
He's making Boehner look good.
I guess so. And
compared to Paul Ryan, Boehner was a fighter.
Yeah, and ran the place and
did stuff.
He fought and lost occasionally, but he fought. And Ryan just got out of the way of everything. And I don't know what the president said. I haven't read the newspaper. I don't know about that thing.
I don't know. All he really ended up doing in his tenure was capitulating to whatever the Freedom Caucus wanted.
Yeah. Well, and
including shutting down government.
Yes.
Had Paul Ryan been at all engaged, maybe we would not have this shutdown. Maybe he would have been able to get between the Freedom Caucus and Trump. Maybe not. We don't know, but, he didn't even try.
No, and no other time would have been more appropriate to try. There was no consequences.
Yeah.
So, but he still, even with no consequences, wouldn't do it. He was too busy making his videos.
About how great the tax cut was.
That guy's really hanging it all on that.
His 2024 campaign bid? I don't know.
Who knows? But I imagine that he didn't do the right thing in the closing days because he's trying to preserve a reputation for something, and there's not many more jobs higher up. He's not going to come back and run for dog catcher, so.
No. I don't think he's going to be content to be a vice presidential candidate again.
He's already done that, so.
Maybe he's even thinking 2020. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'm the principled opposition. Remember me? I didn't do anything.
So, I'm just sort of gratified at how fitting his departure is.
Yeah. Well,
in the middle of a government shutdown, with the Freedom Caucus running wildly around getting Trump to shut down government.
Yeah.
Keep it shut down.
Well, it's their last hurrah. They no longer matter very much, and they don't know what to do. I don't think they know how to operate.
Except that they can be the bug in Trump's ear to make him act like this.
Yes.
That's my plan. Mark Meadows is still going to have open access to the Oval Office anytime he wants it.
I guess so. They'll convert their game from we're withholding votes in the House to we'll get media figures to tell Trump on TV that he should veto.
No, they'll tell Trump.
Oh, they're going to do it themselves?
That phone line's always going to be open.
On TV, I guess. You think they'll take... phone calls are acceptable.
Trump will always take their calls. Trump will always take their meetings.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe they had to wait and do the TV thing like everybody else, but I guess he's gotten used to these guys. Okay. Well, now we wait and see for what happens tomorrow and try and sort things out and see how things go with their first crack at reopening the government and which tack they go with, one big CR or 7 separate ones.
They're going to go separate ones. They're going to do 6 to fund everything but Homeland Security and then short-term Homeland Security. And if Mitch McConnell was smart, he'd go along with it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Even if he's not, he may have to go along with it. By next week, we'll know. Thanks very much, Joan, for coming by. Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year to you.
And we'll talk to you again next Wednesday, unless something really spectacular happens and you feel like calling any time in between. Door's always open.
I hope for not spectacular.
Okay. I'll agree with that. You can just call and say hi then. Thanks, Joan.
Okay. You're welcome.
See you next week. And now stay tuned for, yes, we've got the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Justice will be addressing
From
all
Daily
things
Co's Radio,
personal
on
and otherwise.
netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
And so, as a matter of fact, let me tell you what he has just let us know. As many of you heard, his son passed away early Sunday morning, so he needs to actually step away from the show for a few days to take care of business. And boy, well, you won't be missing our show. We'll still be here to keep things rooted and anchored, and we'll hope for a speedy recovery and a return from justice soon.